This is a true story. In this video, you're about to discover how the world stumbled into the deadliest war in human history, not through one dictator's ambition alone, but through a gathering storm of broken promises, economic devastation, and the failure of democracies to act. This isn't just another retelling of World War II. This is the story behind the story. The voices silenced by propaganda, the truths buried by censorship, and the warnings ignored by world leaders. We'll answer the questions many documentaries skip. Why did ordinary Germans support Hitler? What role did the Treaty of Versailles play in creating Nazi Germany? How did the democracies fail to stop fascism when they had the chance? And we'll address what our viewers have told us they want to hear: the unvarnished truth, free from propaganda, complete with the context that makes history meaningful. Get ready. The gathering storm is about to break. November 11th, 1918, 11 a.m. The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. World War I came to an end. But for Germany, this wasn't peace. It was humiliation. Kaiser Wilhelm II had abdicated. German soldiers marched home not as conquerors, but as defeated men returning to a shattered nation. Yet already, a dangerous myth was taking root. German generals and troops claimed they hadn't been defeated in battle, but betrayed by cowardly politicians at home, the stab-in-the-back legend. This lie would poison German politics for decades. The Treaty of Versailles. In December 1918, US President Woodrow Wilson arrived in Europe promising a new world order. He persuaded world leaders to create the League of Nations, an organization where disputes would be resolved through debate, not warfare. At the Treaty of Versailles, the victorious Allies redrew the map of Europe. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was dismembered. New nations were born: Austria, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Germany itself was drastically reduced in size. It lost territory, population, and resources. But the worst blow came in Article 231, the War Guilt Clause. Germany was forced to accept sole responsibility for starting the war and ordered to pay £6.6 billion in reparations to France and Britain, an astronomical sum the country could never afford. The time bomb buried within this process was a time bomb. Not everyone celebrated the birth of countries like Czechoslovakia. Several contained substantial German minorities who suddenly found themselves living under foreign rule. One day, the desire to reunite all German-speaking peoples would come back to haunt Europe. America withdraws. When Wilson returned to America, his new world order immediately fell apart. The U.S. Congress, fearing entanglement in future European conflicts, refused to join the League of Nations. America withdrew into isolationism, leaving the League crippled from birth. Germany was now a very different nation. Still Europe's largest country, but its militaristic monarchy was gone. It had become a democracy, the Weimar Republic. But this new government was immediately beset by crises. Street battles erupted between extreme right-wing nationalists and communists trying to start a revolution. Then, in 1923, disaster struck. Germany was devastated by hyperinflation prices, doubling every few days, reaching hundreds of % per month. Ordinary people's life savings were wiped out overnight. A wheelbarrow full of banknotes couldn't buy a loaf of bread. This was fertile ground for extremist politicians. What the other documentaries don't tell you. Here's what most histories gloss over. The Weimar Republic wasn't just politically unstable, it was traumatized. Millions of veterans returned home to unemployment and poverty. War widows struggled to feed their children. The middle class, the backbone of German society, saw their savings become worthless. These weren't people looking for a dictator. They were desperate for stability, for dignity, for someone who would restore Germany's honor. Understanding this desperation is key to understanding what came next. Among the rabble-rousing right-wing politicians who emerged from this chaos was Adolf Hitler. Born in Austria, Hitler had fought bravely as a soldier in World War I and earned the Iron Cross. On returning to Germany, he settled in Munich. His fiery oratory soon enabled him to seize control of a small party, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazis. The Beer Hall Putsch. In October 1923, Hitler and his henchmen attempted an armed coup against the Weimar government. It failed. Hitler was sentenced to 9 months in prison. He used the time to write Mein Kampf, My Struggle, in which he blamed Germany's woes on Jews and demanded that Germany rebuild its strength and seek new territories in the East. On his release, Hitler set about building the Nazis into a proper, disciplined political party. From now on, he would use the democratic system to achieve power. Hitler's opportunity. For the next 5 years, Weimar Germany actually prospered. Support for extremist parties left and right dwindled. Then, suddenly, Hitler's opportunity arrived. In October 1929, the US stock market crashed. Billions of dollars were lost. An economic depression swept across the world. Unemployment in Germany soared to over 6 million. Only extremist politicians seemed to offer solutions. By 1931, Hitler's Nazis were a true mass movement, with their own brown-shirted thugs, the SA stormtroops who numbered almost 3 million. Understanding the appeal, our viewers have asked, how could ordinary Germans support Hitler? The answer lies in understanding what the Nazis offered. They promised jobs. They promised order. They promised to restore German pride and tear up the hated Treaty of Versailles. They provided scapegoats, Jews, communists, foreign powers for Germany's suffering. And crucially, they appeared more competent and decisive than the squabbling politicians of the Weimar Republic. In the 1932 elections, the Nazis became the largest party in Germany's parliament, the Reichstag. But Hitler refused to join a coalition, leaving parliament paralyzed. To break the impasse, President Hindenburg made Hitler chancellor in January 1933, head of the government, the seizure of power. Within a month, the Reichstag burned down. Hitler accused the communists and demanded emergency powers. He then used them to ban all other political parties. In August 1934, President Hindenburg died. Hitler declared himself president. He was now absolute leader, the Führer of Germany. At first, there was little sign of what was to come. For the next 3 years, the Führer concentrated on rebuilding Germany's economy. He spent millions on public works, including the 5,000-mile Autobahn system, to soak up the unemployed. But in secret, Hitler was also spending lavishly on a huge rearmament program. Under the Versailles Treaty, the German army had been limited to 100,000 men. The country was forbidden to have an air force, tanks, or submarines. This small army was secretly trebled in size. Then, in 1935, Hitler came out into the open. He unveiled a brand new air force, the Luftwaffe, with 2,500 planes, far more than Britain or France. Unemployment plunged. The Nazis became enormously popular. The first moves, now emboldened, Hitler made his first expansionist moves. In 1935, he reoccupied the Saarland district on the French border after it voted to return from League of Nations control to German rule. A year later, he sent German troops into the Rhineland part of Germany that had been demilitarized at Versailles. At the time, many felt Hitler was only claiming back what was rightfully Germany's. Neither Britain nor France objected. When Berlin hosted the 1936 Olympic Games, the Nazis were seen by many as firm but fair, a government restoring national pride without threatening anyone. Of course, there were signs. The 1935 Nuremberg laws forbade Jews to marry true Aryan Germans and deprived them of citizenship. But when the first real threats to world peace came, they didn't come from Hitler at all. They came from somewhere else entirely. Japan's ambitions. At the start of the 20th century, Japan was already a military power. It had defeated Russia in 1905 and fought alongside the Allies in World War I. After the war, Japan was an acknowledged world power and joined the League of Nations. But the country faced major problems. Its population was exploding, and it had no natural resources to fuel its rapidly expanding industries. Japanese leaders saw the solution in Chinese Manchuria, a land of rich grain fields, with plenty of coal and minerals. In 1931, without even informing their own elected government, Japanese forces in Manchuria seized the capital Mukden and overran the rest of the territory. A puppet state, Manchukuo, was proclaimed. At its headquarters in Geneva, the League of Nations faced its first great test. Japan was universally condemned. Japan's response was blunt. It walked out of the League. The League suddenly realized there was nothing it could do about Manchuria, Mussolini's Italy. Meanwhile, in Europe, Benito Mussolini had seized power in Italy in 1922. He organized a right-wing nationalist party, the Fascists. And when Italy seemed paralyzed by strikes in August 1922, his followers marched on Rome. Fearing civil war, Italy's King Victor Emmanuel asked Mussolini to form a government. Mussolini swiftly stamped out political opposition and assumed dictatorial powers. Like Hitler, Mussolini's first acts made him immensely popular. Massive public works programs provided employment. Corruption was rooted out. The mafia was more or less eliminated. But Mussolini wanted more than adulation. He wanted to recreate the Roman Empire. His first target was Abyssinia, today's Ethiopia. In December 1934, Italian forces provoked a clash with Abyssinian troops. Mussolini demanded reparations. The Emperor of Abyssinia, Haile Selassie, appealed in person to the League of Nations. Here was a small nation under threat from another member of the League. This was the supreme test. But the League did nothing. In October 1935, the Italian army invaded from Eritrea and Italian Somaliland. The primitive Abyssinian forces stood little chance against a modern army equipped with artillery, tanks, and total air superiority. After 6 months, Abyssinia was completely overrun. Emperor Haile Selassie fled into exile in Britain. The League of Nations imposed economic sanctions, but they had little effect. Mussolini's aggression had revealed two things. The League of Nations was impotent, and both Europe's supposed major powers, Britain and France, no longer had the stomach for a fight. Our viewers have asked, why didn't Britain and France stop Hitler and Mussolini when they had the chance? The answer is complex, but crucial to understanding how the world stumbled into war. Both Britain and France had been shattered by World War I. Their economies never fully recovered. Both witnessed waves of strikes and unemployment even before the Great Depression. Above all, both had been traumatized by the horrific casualties of World War I, an entire generation of young men killed in the trenches. A succession of British leaders, Lloyd George, Ramsay MacDonald, and especially Stanley Baldwin, all resolved to keep Britain out of future conflict. Despite horrific casualties on the Western Front, Britain had ended World War I with a large and effective army. This was immediately run down to a small professional force designed to police its empire. When the Great Depression struck, any ideas of modernizing the army were abandoned. France's situation was even worse. Its losses during World War I had been catastrophic. Throughout the 1920 seconds, France's birth rate declined. It became clear there would be a manpower shortage by the mid to late 1930 seconds. France realized it could never compete with Germany on army size alone. The solution was to adopt an entirely defensive mentality. The Maginot Line, a series of fortifications, was begun in 1930 along the frontier with Germany. This meant France was only capable of waging a defensive war. It simply did not have the ability to launch an attack on Italy or intervene effectively in Central Europe. So when Italy conquered Abyssinia, it made sense for both powers to do nothing. It seemed too remote, too much someone else's problem. But by now, they faced a military threat much closer to home, a resurgent and rearming Germany. In 1936, civil war erupted in Spain. It was exceptionally vicious, setting family against family, communist against fascist, believer against atheist. In 1931, a left-wing government had come to power, determined to end the centuries-old Spanish monarchy. The king was forced into exile. In February 1936, parties of the left combined in a popular front to take on the forces of the right in a general election. The Popular Front won narrowly. Even though its reform program was modest, waves of strikes and land seizures led the right to fear a communist takeover was inevitable. Within the Spanish army, long a bastion of conservative and Catholic thinking, senior officers began plotting a coup. Among them was General Francisco Franco. On July 17th, 1,936 army units in Spain's colony in Morocco mutinied. The next day, Franco flew to join them, proclaiming a new nationalist movement to save Spain from communism. The international dimension. At first, Franco faced a problem. He and his army were in North Africa and had to cross the Straits of Gibraltar back to Spain. So he turned to Adolf Hitler. Within a month, transport aircraft from Hitler's Luftwaffe had begun an airlift, taking Franco's battle-hardened veterans over to southern Spain. Hitler seized the opportunity to test his new equipment, expanding armed forces. The first panzer tanks were sent, along with some 12,000 troops. The Luftwaffe deployed its Condor Legion with ultra-modern bombers and fighters. Mussolini sent a so-called volunteer corps of 50,000 men and more than 700 aircraft. In vain did the Republicans appeal to Britain, France, and the Soviet Union for help. But London and Paris, scared of setting off a European war, declared a policy of non-intervention. Cynically, both Germany and Italy signed up to this, while continuing to send massive aid to Franco. Joseph Stalin, the Soviet leader, eventually announced he would help the Republic. About 700 military advisors were sent, along with tanks and fighter aircraft. It was something, but no match for the support Franco received. The largest source of outside help for the Republic came from volunteers, the international brigades. About 30,000 left-wing Americans, British, French, and Germans signed up to fight in Spain. The horror of modern war. The fighting was intense and often accompanied by appalling atrocities against civilians. German and Italian air power was used indiscriminately against civilian targets. Madrid was heavily bombed. But the worst incident came in April 1937, when the Basque town of Guernica was virtually obliterated with 6,000 civilian deaths. The area controlled by the Republic was steadily ground down. Its forces fought with great gallantry, but undertrained and under-equipped amateurs were no match for professional soldiers led by Franco or for the combined modern weaponry of Italy and Germany. At the end of March 1939, Madrid finally surrendered. A month later, Franco formally declared hostilities at an end. The lessons learned internationally, Franco's victory proved a disaster. Hitler and Mussolini were confirmed in their belief that the democracies of Britain and France were impotent to resist real pressure. Stalin despaired of their willingness to confront fascism. Hitler in particular saw his way open to begin the aggressive policies outlined in Mein Kampf. Even before the Spanish Civil War ended, his armies were on the march: Austria and Czechoslovakia. In February 1938, another Nazi plot was discovered in Austria. Austrian Chancellor Kurt von Schuschnigg protested to Hitler. Hitler responded by demanding that Austria stop mistreating Austrian Nazis and unite with Germany. Schuschnigg promptly called a referendum so Austrians could vote on whether to remain independent. On March 12th, 1938, the eve of the referendum, Hitler, fearing it might produce the wrong result, sent in his troops. Complete surprise and an enthusiastic welcome by Nazi sympathizers made it a bloodless invasion. Within hours, Hitler announced Austria's incorporation into the Third Reich. For the first time, a sovereign nation had been subsumed into a greater Germany. Once again, the Western democracies failed to react. In summer 1938, Hitler turned on his next prey, Czechoslovakia. A substantial German minority lived in the northwest of the country, an area known as the Sudetenland. These Sudeten Germans had been part of the old Austrian Empire, but were cut off when Czechoslovakia was created in 1918. This was the time bomb that had started ticking at Versailles. Hitler encouraged Sudeten German demands for autonomy and threatened the Czech government with force if it refused. Undaunted, the Czech government ordered general mobilization and prepared to resist. The Czechoslovak army was large, well-equipped, with formidable fortifications on its frontier with Germany. Hitler backed off. Peace for our time? At the beginning of September, concerned that war might be imminent, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain decided to act as peacemaker. He flew to meet Hitler twice. The Nazi dictator assured him that if he could have the Sudetenland, he would make no further territorial demands in Europe. In Munich on September 29, 1938, with Mussolini acting as mediator, France and Britain signed an agreement giving the Sudetenland to Germany in return for Hitler's formal declaration that he had no more territorial ambitions. Chamberlain flew back to Britain, waving the piece of paper which he claimed guaranteed peace in our time. On October 1st, German troops occupied the Sudetenland and seized the Czech frontier fortifications. Hitler now began sizing up his next target, Poland. Again, the nominal cause was a German minority. Hitler demanded the return of the port of Danzig to German control so East Prussia could be linked with the rest of Germany. The Poles refused, and Hitler hesitated. He wasn't quite ready for all-out war, and he had unfinished business with Czechoslovakia. In March 1939, the eastern part of the country, Slovakia, appealed to Hitler for help in achieving greater independence. Hitler summoned the Czechoslovak Prime Minister to Berlin and browbeat him into putting his country under German protection. German troops marched into the rest of Czechoslovakia unopposed. Most of the country was annexed into the Reich. Slovakia was declared a protectorate. For the first time, Hitler had seized non-German-speaking territory. But again, there was only feeble protest from Britain and France. At the end of March, Hitler again repeated his demand that Poland give up Danzig. This time, France and Britain declared unequivocally that they would declare war if he attacked Poland. But by now, Hitler cared little whether they did or not. He was sure they would be weak and indecisive opponents. In Russia, Stalin had also become increasingly concerned by Hitler's aggression. In April 1939, Stalin proposed an alliance with Britain and France. But negotiations made little progress. Stalin finally despaired, deciding there was another solution to the German threat. On August 23rd, the Soviet Union and the Third Reich, who everyone believed were sworn enemies, announced a non-aggression pact. The agreement secretly specified that Poland would be split between the two countries and Stalin would have a free hand to take over Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Now free from any Russian threat, Hitler ordered his armed forces to prepare for immediate invasion. On the evening of August 31st, the German Wehrmacht prepared for the assault. The Führer had made the decision which would plunge the world into war. September 1st, 1939. German troops thrust deep into Poland to win a swift and absolute victory. Britain and France declared war on Germany. World War II had begun. But how did the world get here? The Treaty of Versailles planted the seeds of resentment in Germany. The Great Depression created the conditions for extremism to flourish. The weakness and indecision of the democracies allowed fascism to grow unchecked. The League of Nations proved powerless to stop aggression, and when it mattered most, the world's leaders chose appeasement over confrontation until it was too late. What you told us. You wanted to hear. Many of you have watched this series multiple times over the years. You've told us it's one of the best World War II documentaries ever made. You've also told us what you want. The unvarnished truth, proper historical context, and the stories that other documentaries leave out. You've criticized versions that censor graphic content or shy away from uncomfortable truths. You've asked for better subtitles, more diverse perspectives, and acknowledgement that history is complex, not a simple story of good versus evil. We hear you. Why this matters today. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it does rhyme. Today, we see echoes of the 1930 seconds. Economic instability, the rise of authoritarian leaders, democracies hesitant to act, international agreements torn up. The question is, have we learned the lessons of the gathering storm? We want to hear from you. Did this video answer questions other documentaries skip? What parallels do you see between the 1930 seconds and today? What other untold stories from World War II should we cover? Are you watching from the US, Europe, or elsewhere? Tell us in the comments. If you believe these stories deserve to be told without censorship or propaganda, subscribe to our channel. Like this video if you think understanding history is the key to not repeating it. Comment below with your thoughts. Our community keeps these conversations alive.